What's up, YouTube? I want to review The Passion of Christ. And now, first of all, this is a well done movie, for one thing. I mean, I don't agree with every part of the movie. Like, I think some of the stuff could have been done a little differently. But overall, it was a very well done, heavy film. And it was well directed, but there's one thing about The Passion that could have been done better, and that is that the Jews are not responsible for his crucifixion, the Romans are. The Romans put him on the cross, and when you look at it, crucifixion was reserved for non-Roman populations. The Romans were very big on persecuting the Jews. They saw Jesus Christ as a threat to their empire and thought he'd lead an uprising in Jerusalem. So they had this whole bounty and this whole idea. And basically, they also put these temple leaders, but the temple leaders, it wasn't a religion thing. They were corrupt and they had been in power for way too long and they were crooked people. And they thought he was going to take attention away from them. But they really weren't the big factor here. I mean, the big factor was that the Romans did not like having a leader that might take energy away from them and might motivate people to go against the empire. And the Romans have always had the tendency to remove leaders. They've always had the tendency to kill people who seemed against the empire. And, that's where Jesus Christ was told by the Romans before, you need to shut up. And he said, no, I'm a Messiah and I know what I'm talking about. And so they said, okay, then you're going to die. And he accepted it. And he knew that somebody was going to turn him over because they were putting a bounty on him. And, the movie tries to make it like the Romans didn't want to get him and the Jews wanted to get rid of him. And that's just so untrue because it's the opposite. And, maybe you had a handful of people in the temple that were angry with him because he knocked over tables, and a handful of people in a temple that, had gotten corrupt from being in power so long. And that's, one small part of it. But that did not lead to his crucifixion. What did was the fact that the Romans had this kind of anti-Semitic quality to them. They tended to want to persecute people that they thought were against the empire, and they even crucified his followers. So that really settles this issue. I mean, they said, oh, the crucifixion is what we use for Jewish and Christian people to scare them from going against the empire. And that's the main thing you see here. And when you see him getting put up there, they say he's the king of the Jews. And the Romans did not like Jews. You see Ben-Hur, you hear about all these stories. They enslaved people. I mean, this is where you see, okay, the Roman Empire may have been a very powerful empire, but there's certain real dark sides to it. And this is one of them. I mean, in the movie, it was a very heavy, well-done movie, though, because he get taken to Pontius Pilate, and they made him out to be a reasonable person. Now, this is where they wanted to take the early views from the Christian church, and they wanted to make him get taken out there, and have all these people that wanted to see them get rid of him. And he truly was not an enemy to people in Israel. People, like a lot of the Jewish people, were moved by him, and they really liked him. And he truly reached out to the people that the Roman Empire had rejected. And he taught people to forgive and to be better individuals, and took people who felt unvalued by this empire, who felt like they were being persecuted, and he was a strong leader. But, this is where the Romans wanted to get rid of him because they thought he was going to be trouble. And that's where it gets down to the issue that, then people want to rewrite history. And they want to say that, the Jews are responsible for Jesus, or they want to go out there and make anti-Semitic stuff that leads to bigotry. And that's where, it's just usually not the case. Because, I mean, there have been Jewish uprisings in history, but this is not one of those situations. And it was clearly an anti-Semitic assault. And they, maybe a handful of people in the temple didn't like him. But that wasn't most of the people that were living in Jerusalem when he got crucified that followed him and that were upset to see that happen to him. I mean, that's where you're seeing that, they clearly wanted to take a very biblical view on this, and it was not a historical view, because they did not take the Romans aside, and they did not show how the Romans had treated the Jews in general and how they viewed them. I mean, when you see more historical points the Romans tend to have this attitude of ruling with an iron fist. And when they took over a part of the world, if anybody looked like they were against them, they go out there and they burn down all their fields, and they would blow up all their military and government places and kill all the people in charge and say, this is our place now. And so the Romans tended to have this kind of system that, obviously got Jesus in trouble because, he was teaching different views and different stuff that was way ahead of his time. And he was in a very, very turbulent period in history where you have a huge empire that's run by military, and he truly believed in loving the enemy and, forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing because they were dumb and ignorant, mean people that wanted to kill him because they thought, oh, let's get rid of him and set an example. And you know this. In this movie, do the Romans look happy when they're going through with him? Don't they look very happy, don't they? They don't look at all ashamed of what they're doing. It's easy to say, oh, it's all the church temple leaders, but the Romans were pretty impressed with what they were doing. They put that thing on, said King of the Jews, and they started making all this anti-Semitic diatribe on him. It was not just, Mel Gibson wanted to put an anti-Semitic side to it because he wanted to make a very biblical version. But that biblical version was kind of written after the whole thing happened, where you had people trying to blame it on the Jews because they wanted more European people, in Europe to believe in that. And so they wanted to persecute the Jews and use that. They didn't want to say that this man was Jewish and try and get people that were already anti-Semitic away from that religion. So they used the Jews as a scapegoat to try to create religion tensions. And, in the Middle Ages, people were violently anti-Semitic, and Jews were constantly persecuted, and you always had times when the Christian church was against Jewish populations, and so, that's where there's been so many people that have acted anti-Semitic based on some stuff in the Bible. That was, you got to question who it was written by, because some of this stuff, it's like, who's right and who's wrong? He was crucified by the Romans because they saw him as a threat to the empire, and they've always done that. And they reserved crucifixion for Jewish and non-Roman populations. And they were more than eager to do this to him. And they had the bounty on him. Now, the church leaders may have been angry with him, but that's where they really wanted to make an anti-Semitic side, to get people against Jewish people. They've always made anti-Semitism by blaming Jewish people on socialism, which happened during World War II. They tried to say they were socialists and responsible for the Depression. Disastrous results in leading to the Holocaust. They have also tried to blame Jewish people for lots of stuff throughout history as a way of trying to persecute them. And it has always led to some form of brutal, violent, destructive anti-Semitism that leads to a genocide or massacre. And so people have always tried to use issues and tried to pick on Judaism, which is wrong and which is absolutely horrible. And, when he made the Jews out to be the ones that wanted to get rid of Jesus, that was just wrong. He should never have done that. He should have tried to keep a historical perspective in that part. When he says, forgive these men, they know not what they do, that was a very powerful line in the movie, and that was a very powerful point. And all the other parts of the movie were very accurate, but when he starts trying to make the Jews out to be the bad guys, that was wrong, and he should have never done that. And, you look at the most bigoted movies, just Google a list, and you will see that movie listed there. That just should not have been in there. And he should not have put anything anti-Semitic like that to try and get people thinking like that. Because, there were a lot of Jewish people who followed Jesus. And a lot of Jewish people who felt like, he was a wonderful person. And people try and make it's like going out there saying that somebody deserves to die for rejecting a prophet, or someone deserves to die for not accepting a religion. Some of these attitudes, leads to an anti-Semitic attitude. So that's why I would not say The Passion's the best movie in the world. It's a very well done movie, but I think that some of the attitudes could have been different. And that's my review. Thanks for watching.